Okay. So last week we were looking at Proverbs. We gotta go fast. We have so much time. Proverbs was written by King Solomon at the height of the kingdom, when his kingdom was big and giant and rich and glorious, and it was around 900 BC. That's not even accurate. Around is very loose. I'm finding out he actually died somewhere around 925 BC, so it was probably closer to like 940 BC. You don't get to write a book when you're dead, though, Eric. Come on, work with me here. So yeah, he wrote it when he was alive. I figured that one out. That took a lot of archaeology. Solomon hoped to give everyone a chance to see God's wisdom the way he had it, because I don't know if you guys remember the story. Solomon got an amazing blessing from God. God says, "What do you want? Ask me for anything." Solomon says, "I need wisdom to guide your people, to rule your people." And God said, "Well, you asked for something that wasn't selfish, so I'm just going to give you all the wisdom you could possibly need, and I'm going to give you a bunch of other stuff that you didn't even ask for. I'm going to give you riches, I'm going to give you glory, I'm going to give you fame. It's all yours." So Solomon had tons of stuff, but he also had tons of wisdom. And up until Jesus, he was probably the wisest guy that ever lived. So the book is not like the other books of the Bible. The other books of the Bible are generally plot lines. They have characters that are real people who once lived on this earth. They actually did real things, actual things happened around them, and it all gets recorded in a book. Not so in Proverbs. Proverbs is all about ideas. It's all kind of imaginary. So it's a lot of advice. That's the biggest part of the book, is advice, 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 advice. But there's some imaginary characters too. There's Lady Wisdom, a non-existent entity that is supposed to personify wisdom. And then we got to see in some New Testament verses we looked at last week that Jesus is wisdom incarnate. So personification, making up an imaginary person out of a thoughtful thing. Incarnate means making up a real person, flesh and blood, actually alive, out of a thoughtful thing. And so Jesus was love and wisdom and courage and strength, all incarnate in one real person. But because of that, we get to see that the wisdom from the book is actually pretty darn close to Jesus' own wisdom, his own way of thinking. All right, so that was all last week. Now I move on to the next book in the Bible. Does anyone know what comes after Proverbs? No one? Try for me. Yes. Dude, you nailed it. Yes. I got this one wrong. Up until like 2 days ago, I thought I was teaching Song of Solomon today.
That's what Sam's teaching.
No, he's teaching Ecclesiastes. Don't you mess with me.
No, he's talked about it on my way in.
No,
I heard him talk.
I was here last night. He taught.
Okay.
Ecclesiastes.
Last week he talked about teaching something because the end of Proverbs was kind of
A lead-in to Solomon,
but he was
which totally messed with me.
yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure he's teaching something.
All right, Andrew, you can go check. Anyways, today we're learning about Ecclesiastes, whether you like it or not. Ecclesiastes, we're subtitling this Eternity in Their Hearts. Now, I just gotta say, real quick, has anyone ever tried reading Ecclesiastes? Okay. How did you do? It was bummery. Okay, anyone else? Took you a while?
I jumped around with other things.
Okay, now I didn't check my calendar. Was anyone in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade when I taught Ecclesiastes in Sunday school downstairs? There was like a chance with 8th graders. No, it wasn't that long ago. No, not that long ago. Goodness. So one time as a Sunday school teacher, I thought, I'll teach Ecclesiastes. That'll be fun. I had several reasons, all of which were stupid. But essentially what ended up happening was this. I read through the entire book, tried to figure out what the whole thing meant, and then I taught the kids one chapter every day for 12 weeks. There's 12 chapters. 12 weeks we studied Ecclesiastes, and I kid you not, I was so bad at figuring out what the book meant that every week it came back and I basically taught the same thing over again up until chapter 12. Chapter 1 was the same as chapter 2, was the same as chapter 3, was the same as chapter 4, was the same as chapter 5, was the same as chapter 6, was the same as chapter 7, was the same as chapter 8, was the same as chapter 9, was the same as chapter 10, was the same as chapter 11. And then the second half of chapter 12, actually it's kind of like the last quarter, was like, yay, something new. But guys, that's not actually how the book goes. I just was really bad at understanding it. And trust me, not to puff myself up after all that degrading, but it's actually really easy to not get the point of the book. If you go read this one on your own and you don't get some help, it's something new. But guys, that's not actually how the book goes. I just was really bad at understanding it. And trust me, not to puff myself up after all that degrading, but it's actually really easy to not get the point of the book. If you go read this one on your own and you don't get some help, this is one of those ones where you're just like, Oh, this sucks. Because basically the way the book sounds is life isn't worth it, life isn't worth it, life isn't worth it. Occasionally he'll slip in like a little bit of, topic change, like it's better if we were dead. Life isn't worth it, life isn't worth it. And you're like, whoa, Solomon, I thought you were wise. What's going on here? But if you really look at it from the wide view, you start to see the differences throughout the chapters. It's not the same in chapter 1 as it is in chapter 2. It's not the same as it is in chapter 2 as it is in chapter 3. There's very large differences. There's a progression of thought, but you got to zoom out. You got to zoom out and see the whole book at once. If you don't see the whole book at once, probably won't get it. And that was my problem. When I was teaching the Sunday school kids, I was teaching one chapter at a time. I never got the zoom out. I never got the big view. So I gotta say, if you were ever going to study Ecclesiastes, I think the best way to study it is the whole book in one day. I think that's the best way to study it. Yeah.
Did you get approached by those kids' parents and say, hey, you taught this book wrong?
No, because I think most adults don't even know what Ecclesiastes is about. Anybody know what Ecclesiastes means? You do? Oh, okay, you're just scratching your nose. There's very good timing, though. Very good timing. It means the teacher. The teacher. And so we'll watch a quick video, and we'll get back into the PowerPoint and go through the book, but you'll see the teacher is the lead character, the only character in the entire book. But again, he's kind of an imaginary character. Kind of. We'll get into exactly who he is after the video. Excuse me.
The book of Ecclesiastes is part of the Bible's wisdom literature, and it opens with this line: the words of Kohelet, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now in Hebrew, the word Kohelet means someone who has gathered people together. And in this case, it's to learn, so it's often translated in English as teacher. And the teacher is said to be a son or a descendant of King David. And so there are different views about who this figure might have been. Many think that it refers to King Solomon, others to maybe one of the later kings of David's line, and still others think that it's actually a later Israelite teacher who has adopted a Solomon-like persona as a teaching figure. Whichever of these views is correct, the key thing is to recognize that the teacher is a character in the book and is different than the author of the book, who remains anonymous. So we do hear the teacher's voice for most of the book, but it's actually a different voice, the author, who introduces us to the teacher in the first sentence, and then at the end concludes the book by summarizing and evaluating everything the teacher just said. So the author is someone who wants us to hear all that the teacher has to say, and then help us process it and form our own conclusion. So what does the teacher have to say? Well, the author summarizes the teacher's basic message at the beginning and right at the end, and it's Hevel, Hevel. Everything is utterly Hevel. Now, most English Bibles translate this word Hevel as meaningless, but that doesn't quite capture the heart of the idea. In Hebrew, Hevel literally means vapor or smoke, and the teacher uses this word 38 times in the book as a metaphor to describe how life is, first of all, temporary or fleeting, like a wisp of smoke. But secondly, also how life is an enigma or a paradox. Like smoke, it appears solid, but when you try and grab onto it, there's nothing there. So there's so much beauty or goodness in the world, but just when you're enjoying it, tragedy strikes and it all seems to blow away. Or we all have a strong sense of justice, but all of the time, bad things happen to good people. So life is constantly, it's unpredictable, it's unstable, or in the teacher's words, like chasing after the wind. Hevel. Now that's kind of a downer. So why is he saying all of this? The author's basic goal is to target all of the ways that we try to build meaning and purpose in our lives apart from God. And he lets the teacher deconstruct these. So the author thinks we spend most of our time investing energy and emotion in things that ultimately have no lasting meaning or significance. And he lets the teacher give us a hard lesson in reality. You can see this most clearly in the opening and closing poems, which focus first of all on time and then on death. So the teacher says, you can spend your whole life working and achieving because you think that makes your life meaningful. You should really stop and consider the march of time. For all of the human effort that takes place in the world, nothing really ever changes. So sure, we develop technology and we build nations that rise and fall, but go climb a mountain and see if it cares. It was there long before any of us, and it will be here long after. I mean, no one's even going to remember you or anything you did 100 years from now. But that mountain, it'll still be there. And the ocean will still be breaking on the beach, and the sun will still rise and set. And so time will eventually erase you and me and everything that we care about. And if that's not disheartening enough, the teacher also can't stop talking about death all the way through the book, but especially in this poem near the end. He says, death is the great equalizer, and it renders meaningless most of our daily activities. It devours the wise and the fool, the rich and the poor, no matter who you are, what you've done, good or bad, we're all going to die. And it's inescapable. So with these two ideas in hand, the teacher goes on to consider all the activities and false hopes that we invest our lives in to find meaning and significance, like wealth or career or social status or pleasure. So you think working hard is going to make life worth it? Think about the stress and the toll that that takes on you, all the anxiety and the sleepless nights. And by the time you actually earn some wealth, you're going to be too old to enjoy it anyway. And then by the time that you have to pass it on to someone, they may not even be someone who cares about anything that you do. Or maybe you think pleasure is going to make life worth it for you. Go for it. You know, live for your vacations, live for the weekend party. Monday always comes. Hevel, hevel. Everything is utterly hevel. So what does the teacher advocate then? That we become pure hedonists or relativists? Well, no, that would be hevel too. The teacher acknowledges the ideas from Proverbs that living by wisdom and the fear of the Lord, that these have real advantages. On the whole, life will probably go better. See, but the problem is that even living by wisdom and the fear of the Lord, they're hevel too, because they don't guarantee a good life. Good people die tragically, and horrible people live long and prosper. There's just too many exceptions. And so even wisdom is hevel. Again, not meaningless, but an enigma. Wisdom doesn't work the way you think it should have. So what's the way forward in the midst of all this hevel? And here, paradoxically, the teacher discovers the key to the true enjoyment of life under the sun. It's accepting hevel. It's acknowledging that everything in your life is totally out of your control. About 6 different times at some of the bleakest moments in his monologue, the teacher talks about the gift of God, which is the enjoyment of simple, good things in life, like friendship, or family, a good meal, or a sunny day. You can't control these things. You're certainly not guaranteed them, but that's their beauty. When I come to adopt a posture of total trust in God, it frees me to simply enjoy my life as I actually experience it, not as I think it ought to be. Because even my expectations about what life ought to be are ultimately hevel. Hevel. Everything under the sun is utterly hevel. And so the teacher's words come to a close. Right here at the end, the author speaks up again, and he brings it all to a conclusion. He says, the teacher's words are very important for us to hear. He likens them to a shepherd's staff with a goad, a pointy end, which might hurt when it pokes you, but he says the teacher is trying to poke you to get you to move in the right direction, towards greater wisdom. The author then warns us that you can actually take the teacher's words too far, and you could spend your whole life buried in books trying to answer life's existential puzzles. Don't try, he says, you'll never get there. And so instead, the author offers his own conclusion, and it's this: fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of humans, for God will bring every deed into judgment, every hidden thing, whether good or evil. And so the author thinks it's good to let the teacher challenge your false hopes and remind you that time and death make most of life completely out of your control. But what gives life true meaning is the hope of God's judgment. The hope that one day God will clear away all of the hevel and bring true justice to our world. And it's that hope that should fuel a life of honesty and integrity before God, despite the fact that I remain puzzled by most of life's mysteries. And that's the wisdom of the book of Ecclesiastes.
All right, everybody just like totally overjoyed. Totally excited. Yeah, let's talk about meaninglessness. Just like totally pumped up, right? Good to go? Just the best. Okay, so here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to have to do this speedy style, so we're not actually going to go through all my slides. I'm just going to leave the pictures up so you guys have something to stare at. But we're going to do this by example. That word, hevel, it literally means a mist or fog. So, mist, fog. Try and grab it. Go ahead. How much can you catch in your hands?
I got this much.
This much?
This much.
Isn't it cool looking in front of the projector? Isn't that
Oh,
like
yeah.
just the best?
I caught,
Dude,
I caught a big
with the
one.
lights off and a laser, it's kind of like a
I caught a big one.
like a lightsaber, but you can't really see it in the bright lights.
I caught a big one.
A big one. So
Dude, that looks
this is
awesome
the
right
deal.
there.
It says hevel, everything is hevel, and if you translate that the way most Bibles do, with like a one word, so you turn hevel into a single word, you're not going to get the whole point of it, because it's a two-meaning word. It means both smoke and vapor, you know, but it also means a riddle, an enigma. So what is he really saying? He's saying literally all the good things in life are like this, just smoke. They seem really, really cool to look at, but when you try and latch onto them, you're not actually going to get anything. If you try and latch on to fun, you won't actually get anything. It looks really cool. It's really neat to have fun, but then it'll disappear, and you don't even know why. And you don't even know where it went. It's just all gone. And so this is I know it'll do that from time to time. It's a little incontinent. So the teacher. Let me clear up the whole teacher-author thing. This is something I think people have argued about way too much. I think it's actually really obvious in the book if you read the whole book in one go. The teacher is the imaginary younger version of Solomon. The author is Solomon when he's old. I just got it. You guys are only going to stare at the sheet from now on. There we go. So the author is Solomon when he's old and he's at the end of his life and he's figured things out the hard way. Now, when he was young, God gave him wisdom, but in his middle years, he stopped using it on himself. He kept using it to govern the country. He kept using it to be a good farmer. He kept using it to do stuff, but he stopped using his own wisdom on himself. So in his middle years, in his midlife, as we might call it, those 30s, 40s, and 50s, those years, he married 1,000 women. Those years were the times where he got confused and it got dark and he kind of walked away from God. Now, he may have actually jotted down some of the things that the older Solomon would one day stick in this book, but I don't think he meant whatever he jotted down in those years to be encouraging. And that's why the bulk of Ecclesiastes is not encouraging. It just tells you, oh yeah, riches, that'll make you happy. I tried that. It doesn't work. Like, that's the kind of stuff he writes in Ecclesiastes. Yeah, having a great job. Man, that'll make it. Yeah, I've got the best job and it still stinks. Like, that's the kind of stuff he writes in Ecclesiastes. And you go through and he makes you this giant list. And it's like all of the things you think should help you. And he just says over and over again, no, it's just hevel. It just looks cool. You can't keep it, though. It doesn't actually help you. It just looks cool. He just kind of gets depressed. And so the author just like lets the teacher ramble, because the author's goal, and that's something that totally got right in the video, was the author wants you to see that the smartest man who's gotten to do everything still isn't fulfilled. Why? Why? And that's the huge deal about the book. And if you read the whole book and you don't know the why, as you read it, it's just depressing and boring and sad. But if you know why as you read the book, then it all makes sense. As you read the book, he keeps saying, this stuff doesn't work, that stuff doesn't work, I tried this, I tried that, it's all hevel. It's all just like this vapory thing you can't keep. And it doesn't make me happy in the end. It just makes me wish I had more of it. Why is the author letting him ramble like this? Because the author is the older version of Solomon, and he knows. He remembers being that guy. He remembers being the rich, young ruler who got to do everything he wanted. And he looks back and he goes, you know what I was doing back then? I was aware of God, but I wasn't with God. I was aware of him, but I wasn't with him. So I was aware of God. Yeah, he's the guy who gave me my brains. He's the guy who gave me my money. Thanks, God. Now I'm going to use my brains and my money. Bye, God. So the older Solomon looks at the younger Solomon and goes, that's what he did wrong. And so he just lets younger Solomon ramble and tell you the truth. Because you know what? Most of us don't have all the money in the world. And so we still think that having all the money in the world would actually make us happy. Because we haven't got to try it yet. We think it's actually going to help. So he lets Solomon tell you, I had all the money. It didn't help. He's like, oh, you think that having, a great relationship with humans, the best girlfriend ever, the best boyfriend ever, the best husband ever, the best wife ever, you think that will fix your entire life? He says, okay, go ahead, Solomon. Tell him like it is. There's a verse in there that says, you can find one good man in 1,000, but you can't even find one good woman in 1,000. And I thought it was so ironic that Solomon is the one who wrote those words, because he tried 1,000 women. Think about that. What does that tell you about his marriage relationships? He says, you can't find one good woman in 1,000. That means that's why he kept looking. Think about how sad that is. Think about how sad that is. He gets married. It doesn't make him happy because he's walking apart from God. So what does he do? He gets married again. He gets married again. And he gets married. He tries it 1,000 times, and every time he thinks, this will change my life. This will make everything better. This will make me happy. Nope. He fixed nothing. Not that it says, yeah, kept all 1,000. It's weird, right? It's just stupid. Sam said it last night, that's hoarding. That's what that is. Made me laugh. Anyways, so he says this is all Hevel, all Hevel, all Hevel. And then he has this part at the beginning and the end. And these are some of the best parts of the book, where he defines how time will undo you. And then later he defines how death will undo you. And so essentially, no matter what you think you are, no matter what you think you've accomplished, no matter what you think you can do in this life, time will eventually erase everything you've done, or death will erase everything you've done, or in most cases, both. Yay! Remember the point. The author, the older Solomon, is letting the younger Solomon tell you how broken life is. Why? Why is Solomon's life broken? He's rich, he's powerful, he's famous, he's got every pretty girl in the land married to him. Like, why is his life broken? Because he's not walking with God. That's what the older Solomon knows that the younger Solomon doesn't know. And so the older Solomon is just like, go ahead, Solomon, you keep rambling, go for it, go for it. So the teacher, the younger Solomon, he just keeps telling you, you know what? Time won't get you there. And then he makes this list. Wealth doesn't do it, tried that. Career doesn't do it, tried that. Status doesn't do it, tried that. There's even more that they don't mention in the video. Scientific discovery, nope, doesn't do it, tried that. Wisdom and philosophy, being happy with drinking and partying, doesn't work. Building awesome buildings, like most of us have never tried that one. Solomon actually tried that one. Let's just set up an amazing building. Let's just do it. Let's build something. You guys ever played with Legos? You know the joy of making something, and you finally get to that moment where you put the last piece on, you're like, I think it's done. I think that's, oh yeah, that's perfect. That's just perfect. It's better when it's bigger. Solomon builds these giant, ridiculous buildings out of stone and gold and bronze. Yeah, seriously, gold and bronze is building materials.
All by himself.
I know.
Nobody.
He's very strong. Very strong. Related to Sims? No, he wasn't. He wasn't. He tried that, didn't work. Having property, just owning huge plots of land, having a bunch of renters, having a bunch of farms and vineyards, tried that, didn't work. Tried luxury, just grapes every day fed to you by servants as you sit upon your, 3-foot thick feather pillow. Just everything you could think of pleasure-wise and luxury-wise. And he's like, you know what? It still didn't work. Still didn't make me happy. And older Solomon is sitting there at the end of the book. He's only got a few verses at the very, very end. He's just sitting there kind of going, are you done yet? Because he's thinking back, I used to be that guy. Why did it take me so long? Why did it take me so many years to get to it all doesn't work? You'd think after I figured out, the first 3 things didn't work, I should have just realized none of them were going to work. None of them were going to make me happy apart from God. But it didn't. It didn't go quick. Solomon took his time to figure all this stuff out. So, career, I think, is probably one of the biggest ones. A lot of us in the junior high, high school time, we start to figure out, I want to do this thing for the rest of my life. And we kind of stick everything into that basket. You know, I stick all my time into it, all my money into it. If you haven't started yet, trust me, a lot of you guys will be doing this soon, where you start dreaming about being able to do something you can't do now. And you'll start planning about the school you want to go to. And Solomon isn't saying, don't do it. He's not saying, don't go get a cool job. He's not saying, don't go to college. He's not saying that. He's saying, if you go to college, you get a cool job, and you make a lot of money, it won't make you happier. That's what he's saying. But he's saying, do it anyways. Remember, there's a stupid guy writing most of the book, and there's a smart guy letting him write it. He wants you to see how broken life is apart from God, so he's letting the guy apart from God do the talking. And so he's saying, you know what? Coolest job there ever was. I was in charge of everyone. I got to tell everybody what to do. Doesn't get a lot cooler than that. I know as a little kid, I thought being the president was the best job. Like, it's like being the king, right? You just were in charge of everyone. You had to tell everybody what to do. King Washington, that's how it went. George Washington, King of America. So check out this verse with me. Ecclesiastes 2:11. It says, but as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was all so meaningless. This word, pebble. It was all so riddly, enigma, smoke I couldn't keep hold of. It was like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. If you race the wind, what will you get if you win?
Victory, sweet, sweet victory.
And honestly though, if you try to race the wind, is there even a chance of winning? Like, what are you
Probably
hoping? Probably, and then there'll be dust blowing in your eyes because you were in the wind. Yeah, it's just like a terrible idea with nothing to gain. He says this is the problem. If you go after your job like it is the greatest, most awesomest thing in the entire world, you'll find out that it's not. That's what you'll get. If you race the wind, you'll find out it wasn't racing. That's what you get. There was no race. You were stupid.
But you still win.
No, you don't. If you race a turtle who can't talk, you feel like you won until you realize the turtle wasn't racing you. It wasn't racing you. You didn't win
Doesn't matter, I beat
anything.
it.
Nothing. I still beat it. Yes, of course, obviously. That makes so much difference. All right, so then we get over to the slightly happier part. I love that he goes a little happy here, and then death. Just really picks it up a notch, doesn't it? So this is the idea. He says, even though I just got done kind of bashing all these things, I gotta say that sometimes when you're not striving for them, sometimes when you're not elevating them on a pedestal and saying, this is the greatest thing in my entire life, then they actually can be a gift from God. When you're not saying that family is the reason you're alive, family can be a blessing. Sam said it last night, family won't bless you unless you bless them. They're human too. They're human too. If you actually want to get something out of a relationship, to put something into a relationship, so friendship, same way. A good meal, I love this. If you treat food like it's God, if you treat food like it is the greatest thing in the universe, you'll end up nitpicking every meal. You can't help it. If you really worship food, then you're going to look at food and go, yeah, that wasn't that good. I've had better. And so every meal is kind of a letdown, but he says, no, if you're worshiping God, if God is the God of your life, and then he gives you an awesome meal, or he lets you share a meal with your friends, or he lets you share a meal with your family, and God is still on the throne of your life, God is still in charge, God's still the most important thing, then you can look at that meal as if it was a blessing, as if it was a present from God. And then suddenly, it's actually really cool. Suddenly the meal is really fun. Just hanging out with your friends or hanging out with your family, it's suddenly really fun. You know, someone flicks a little macaroni and cheese at your nose, you know, it's a good time. He says that can be a gift from God. But if you worship the food, then it's just devil. You can't keep it, it's just going to go away. It all turns into poop eventually. He says even a sunny day, or, you know, for you pluviophiles, the rainy days, the weather that acclimates to your character, if you will, those can be a gift from God. But again, if you worship the weather, how many days of the year is the weather not the way you want it? Versus how many days of the year is the weather the way you want it? Do you guys see what I mean? If you make weather, like, if you make a nice day, quote unquote nice day, the thing you live for, you will hate most of your life, and you only enjoy like 1 or 2 days a year when it just so happens to be perfect. If you worship the beach, I'm sorry to say, honey, you will kind of loathe all the days where you're not at the beach. I know, and the beach is awesome. So you get to praise God when you're there, and you get to hope in the Lord when you're not. So then he finishes with the death thing, and I love the gonna die, gonna die, gonna die, gonna die popping up in the video. That was so choice, so perfect. But this is the truth. It doesn't actually matter how rich you are, you will die. It doesn't matter how famous you are, you'll die. What? Yeah, Walt Disney does not have his head in a little glass jar in some vault somewhere. It's not true. I'm sorry, guys. He's dead. He really did die. Lung cancer. It killed him. The autopsy showed it. If they stuck his head in a glass jar, it's a dead head.
What if they have fake lungs attached to it?
No, that's not how it works.
Breathing for him.
Not how it works. Iron lungs are not actually replacement lungs, as it turns out. Google iron lung. They're really cool. Anyway, so death equalizes everything, and now we're almost at the end. Chapter 12 is the last chapter. He almost finishes the book with death! It's nearly the last thing in the book! But then there's this little extra. Right after verse 7, suddenly the author picks up the book again. He only wrote verse 1 and like a few other little tiny verses in between. Oh, hey. It all turns into poop eventually. He says, even a sunny day, or, you know, for you pluviophile, the rainy days, the weather that acclimates to your character, if you will, those can be a gift from God. But again, if you worship the weather, how many days of the year is the weather not the way you want it? Versus how many days of the year is the weather the way you want it? Do you guys see what I mean? If you make weather, like, if you make a nice day, quote unquote nice day, the thing you live for, you will hate most of your life, and you will only enjoy like 1 or 2 days a year when it just so happens to be perfect. If you worship the beach, I'm sorry to say, honey, you will kind of loathe all the days where you're not at the beach. I know, and the beach is awesome. So you get to praise God when you're there, and you get to hope in the Lord when you're not. So then he finishes with the death thing, and I love the gonna die, gonna die, gonna die, gonna die popping up in the video. That was so choice, so perfect. But this is the truth. It doesn't actually matter how rich you are, you will die. It doesn't matter how famous you are, you'll die. What? Yeah, Walt Disney does not have his head in a little glass jar in some vault somewhere. It's not true. I'm sorry, guys. He's dead. He really did die. Lung cancer. It killed him. The autopsy showed it. If they stuck his head in a glass jar, it's a dead head.
What if they have fake lungs attached to it?
No, that's not how it works.
Breathing for him.
Not how it works. Iron lungs are not actually replacement lungs, as it turns out. Google iron lung. They're really cool. Anyway, so death equalizes everything, and now we're almost at the end. Chapter 12 is the last chapter. He almost finishes the book with death! It's nearly the last thing in the book! But then there's this little extra. Right after verse 7, suddenly the author picks up the book again. He only wrote verse 1 and like a few other little tiny verses in between, and he writes the very, very end of it. Well, technically, yes, but what I mean is writing it from his own perspective. Writing it from being the older man who's walking with God once again, looking back at his younger self and going, you were stupid. Okay, so this older guy, he only writes a few verses in the whole book. So we get to that last part. And what he says is, why I've shown all of this to you is so that it will poke you in the bum. This is true. This is true. This is what shepherds do with their goats. They take a thorn off a plant, or they'll take an iron nail, and they'll tie it with leather cord onto the end of their staff. A little bit sideways so it doesn't hit the ground when they put their staff down. The picture's a little deceiving. But anyways, they'll be on the end of their staff facing sideways, and if a sheep ain't going, you know, everybody's leaving, everyone's going that way, he walks over the sheep and goes, point, and just sticks the thorn right in their bum. And they go, whoa! And they just start walking. And they will walk. And so he says, I've shown all this depressing stuff to you. I've shown you that everything in life is utterly vapor, ungraspable, unkeepable, won't satisfy you. I've shown you all that to push you in the only direction where there is meaning. The only direction where there is life, true life. The only direction that can take all that vapor and give it purpose. Give it something meaningful, something keepable. The only direction is walking with God. That is it. That's all there is. There is nothing else that will make it make sense. And he says, so here's the deal. Now that you've had your little poking the bum. Don't dwell on this. Don't continue the rest of your life. He says you could write so many books about this, but that's not going to help you. Don't dwell on this to the point where every time you're working, you're thinking, oh yeah, that's right. Work is meaningless. You know, every time you share a meal with your family, you're like, oh yeah, food is meaningless. Don't do it, he says. You can't dwell on that. You have to dwell on what gives meaning to all of those experiences. What gives meaning to sharing a meal with your family? God does. What gives meaning to a job? God does. What gives meaning to having a life and living it? God does. He gives meaning to all that. And if you avoid God, then you are stuck back in those younger days of Solomon, trying everything, getting nothing. Or you can just start following God. Now, the reason that Solomon writes this book as an older man is because a lot of times people who are young don't take advice from people who are old. You guys ever experienced this? Does anybody have an older sibling? Did your older sibling... None of you guys do? Wow, there's like 3 of us? Dang. Cool, okay, so older siblings, listen up. Younger siblings. Did your older siblings ever do something really, really stupid?
Oh, yeah.
And then you watched them do it and you thought, I'm never going to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. Did your parents ever tell your older sibling that they shouldn't do it?
Yes.
So they did it, even though your parents said not to. But you watched a young person do it, have a mistake happen out of it, have bad things come from that, and then you learn not to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Older siblings, listen to me. Older siblings have the hardest time. I do not envy you. I was a middle child.
You have to mess up to show the younger siblings.
Older siblings, you will mess up the most. I'm very sorry. You will. You will mess up the most because, and this is the deal, when old people tell you that stuff is bad for you, you won't listen to them. This is how you ruin your life. This is what happens. I'm sorry, it's true. It's true. Older people will tell you, don't do this. You're like, but I won't. Older people will tell you, that will hurt you. You're like, oh, it won't be that bad. I'm sorry. Fire burns? Nah, not that much, right? No! Bad things hurt. They hurt a lot. Okay, so here's the deal. Solomon, old guy, he knows. As an old guy who's learned all of his life lessons, if he just comes to you as an old guy and says, don't be stupid, you're going to be like, you're old, go away. You smell funny. You're going to disrespect the older person. You're not going to listen to the older person. You're going to ignore the older person. So what he's trying to do, as old Solomon, is say, okay, I know you won't listen to me, so listen to young Solomon. Listen to the kid Solomon. Listen to the 20-something Solomon who went to parties. I don't really go to parties anymore. I'm old. But listen to 20-something Solomon. He did that. Listen to him. Let him be your older brother. Let him go through all the crud and the stuff that just wrecks you and sucks you dry and just obliterates your life, makes your life meaningless. Let him tell you about how all that is something you should avoid, and may you please listen to him. And then he gives you the sum up at the end. He says, fear God and keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of humans. For God will bring every deed into judgment, every hidden thing, whether good or evil. What is he doing right there? He mentions judgment. Why? He's talking about heaven. He's talking about the life after this life. He's talking about how this is not everything. And so if you live like this is everything, you get nothing. But if you live, like God is everything, and one day you're left with God, then you have everything. So he's trying to set everything in perspective for you. Why does everything in this life not work? Why does everything in this life seem to just be vapor that just kind of disappears? You notice how it's all gone now? Yes. Just disappeared.
Vapor.
He says, why is this life just going to disappear? Because this life is temporary. Heaven is permanent. Don't you dare live like this life is permanent. It will ruin you. It will eat you up and spit you out, this life. But God will be there for you at the end, and he's going to be there for you through this whole life. So do not abandon him. Do not walk away from him. Do not ignore him. In everything you do, be it work, play, food, family, friends, whatever you have in this life, make God the center of all of it. If you can do that, then all of those things will have meaning. They'll be good for you. They'll be great. But if you take God out of his place, and you just focus on the things in this life, you won't even get this life. Not to mention the next one. All right, you had your hand up. What's up?
Wasn't Solomon so good to be able to be the same?
Ooh, good question. He wasn't the oldest. I do believe he had a few younger siblings, but he actually had a lot more older siblings. He was one of the younger sons. Weird, right? If you read through the stories of First Kings, yeah, if you read First Kings and then also Second Chronicles, they detail the story. Basically, David chose the guy most suited to be king. The brothers didn't like that, and there was a small war where David, as king, like the dad of all these princes, he actually got kicked out of the palace, was chased all over the country by one of the older sons. Yeah, by Absalom. And Absalom killed a bunch of the brothers who might have been able to try and get the throne also. It was really bad, really bad. But eventually Solomon did end up on the throne. So. But yeah, he was still really young when he ended up on the throne.
Take that, Absalom.
Well, no, at no point was anyone like that except for the generals of David. David was like, I don't even want to fight him. That's what I said. What happens if I kill him? Do I feel like I won? No! I'll just be depressed for the rest of my life. So he told everyone, don't kill him, just capture him. And then one of the generals took it into his own hands and went ahead and killed him. David got pretty steamed. That was bad. Bad deal. All right, so we need to wrap up. But this is the whole point of the book, right here, this last little section. Do not focus on the depression. Bad deal. All right, so we need to wrap up. But this is the whole point of the book, right here, this last little section. Do not focus on the depressingness of Ecclesiastes. Realize that the depressingness is what could happen if you walk away from God, and don't walk away from God. That's the point of Ecclesiastes. Keep your eyes on Him. Keep following Him. Keep walking with Him. And then all those things that could have been depressing will actually be filled with joy. This is your choice as a sheep. You can go with the shepherd, and everything is taken care of for you. Life has joy. That's a guarantee. Life isn't always happy. Life isn't always the way you wanted it, but life has joy. That's your guarantee. Or you can walk away from the shepherd and you get a different guarantee. No joy. Oh no, death is guaranteed to both. Yeah, the sheep dies in both cases. I'm sorry. Shepherd can't keep a sheep alive forever. That happens in heaven. That's different. Yeah. No, death for both. That was very clear in Ecclesiastes. Gonna die, gonna die, gonna die, gonna die. No, the point is stay with the shepherd and you get joy. All right, let's pray. Lord, we thank you for books like Ecclesiastes that tell us like it is. Even if they can be a little disheartening at times, Lord, thank you for the truth that is within them. Thank you, Lord, that you can show us why life doesn't really work without you. Lord, may we all learn in this room and in this church building why life doesn't work without you before we have to experience it. So many of us have already found you, Lord, and yet some of us will walk away from you. I just pray, Lord, it's not these. It's not these. That these who've actually seen into the book of Ecclesiastes, they've seen what it teaches us, what it reveals to us. Lord, may you lock that in our hearts. May we never forget it. May the next time we're considering abandoning you, considering walking off your path, considering stopping following you, may we remember that to do so is foolishness. All of our joy is in you. All of our joy is in you. Even the joy that comes from elsewhere started with you. And so we ask you, Lord, just keep that in our hearts. Help us to follow you. Help us to stay on that path, even when it gets difficult, even when we're tempted. If there's anyone here this morning that's never actually been on that path before, if you're here this morning and you've never said, Lord, I want to follow you, that's a decision you can make right now. If you want to start following Jesus, if you want to say, take my life and use it, I want the life that you can give me. If right now you want to say to Jesus, forgive me of all of my sins, then you can just raise up a hand. No one's looking around. No one's peeking. This isn't weird. This is just you admitting to God that you need Him. So if you want that right now, just raise up a hand so that I can see your hand. And I'll pray with you. You can talk to God. You can say, forgive me. You can say, Lord, give me eternal life. Is there anyone here that needs to do that wants to do that right now? All right, well then, Lord, bless these junior hires as they go. Help them to remember what Ecclesiastes teaches us. and help us to not focus on the depressing pieces of it. We ask that in your name. Amen.